photography with a different title.
There's a woman whose name escapes me now who did, around 2008, a history. She did a project or dissertation for the Creative Writing Matters on Glasgow creative writing anthologies from 1995, from nine lives right up to that present time, and she did it as a kind of PowerPoint and all these images, the covers and the story and the contents and the writers and so on, what happened to them. It was an amazing thing. So I think that the history of the course, if you like, course history, should be retrieved, could be retrieved, must be there. I know we've got a destruct button where we say, oh, GDPR, whatever, destroy everything, burn everything. I think that's what seems to be happening, the annihilation of the archive. But having the history of the course in your head and having been able to say, these are the students, and now and again I'll go back and find a document which is everybody who was on the course in the year 2000, everybody was on the course in the year, and I fish out those documents to see who was there. But that period, 2005 to 2008, I'm imagining is the beginning of my disengagement from the course as creative writers come in. I still did tutoring and I supervised PhD students. I supervised a creative writing PhD student, I think, right up to 2018 or whatever, you know. But
okay. I don't think I would have been aware that you were disengaging with that then. I would have still thought of you as being part of that, and of course mine was both creative and critical. Yeah.
The thing I wrote in 2010 called Sentence to 15 Years, which was a retrospective from 1995 to 2010, had a lot of the history of the course in it, and I'll send you a copy of that. That had a lot of the history of the course, and it name-checked every tutor who'd ever taught on the course. As far as I'm aware, I think it was all-inclusive. And we also had an event, I think, that year where we had a one-day event. I organised, it was a colloquium, and everybody had 10 minutes. And we actually had about 30 or 40 writers come in and do these short pieces, read a poem. That was an amazing day, a one-day event, and more things like that should be held. So it was, you know, people come back who graduated 3 or 4 years before, some had published novels, some had published stories or poems or whatever. But so I think having that and having a kind of recognition of the course has a history. We're not very good at keeping tabs on things or keeping the archive and saying this is where alumni footprint, as it were, of the creative writing course is hugely significant when you think of who's come out of it. I mean, Rachel Seifert shortlisted for the Booker, Jen Hadfield won the TSL. I mean, there are a lot of really significant
Louise herself was the professor.
Louise, the prize, Zoe Strachan's a professor now.
Yeah, so that's happened.
So there's just massive success that's come out of it, and I think it was one of the most mediatised courses at the University of Glasgow in the late 90s and early 2000s, partly because I'm a huge publicist, not a self-publicist, but another publicist. So I would get all these, and I knew the literary
made that distinction.
And I would get as much. I would really I was 99% push for others. And one time a student came and said, I'm applying for the Arts Council, I want X amount of money for the Arts Council. Another tutor said, you'll never get it. They got it because I said, we'll do that. So there's always the wing clippers. There's always people who'll say, I don't know, will you do it? Like the Land of Napoleon, whose novel was adapted for the cinema. One of the others, not a creative writing tutor, but another tutor said, is it any good? You know, can work with that bit? And it was, yes, it was good, it was superb. So I think having faith in writers, but also being able to be, it's the push and the small at the back that they need if they haven't got it from the cradle, if they haven't got the arrogance of the cradle.
Exactly. That's the job.
Professional
I think.
networking, if they're not from professional backgrounds, they need that. I mean, Louise Welch did say that. She said many years ago about the course allowed working class people to have the professional networking and mentoring that they didn't have through their family or their parents' friends or whatever. You often hear these stories about a writer, I mentioned this at a dinner party and somebody says, oh, my husband's a butler, but you know, and that's how things get done. It's very often, it's not meritocratic, it's Masonic or monetised in some way. So I think to actually have people coming in, and this is a conduit, if they pass through this conduit, they'll do it. And Philip said before after he retired, he said, I get told now by publishers, we trust your judgment, so now we look at creative writing courses and say, especially at Glasgow, and say, if a writer's come through there, that portal, they're worth a look, and we'll look at stuff, we won't throw it in the slush pile, we'll say, right, okay, that's been a kind of apprenticeship you've served, and you've been mentored, and you've been networked, and so on.
And I mean, for you, Willy, this seems like a really important part of who you are in your practice, like that noticing and encouraging people kind of runs through everything you've done. Like, I mean, what do you kind of get out of it? Obviously you are really stimulated by, and that position, it feels like you and Philip there's a good lineage there. You're different in your approach, but similar in terms of noticing, encouraging, supportive.
I want to give people the support I never had. Also, there's an important fact, which is both Philip and I had lives. We weren't academics who depended on creative writing. To be fair and to be true, because a lot of people, I would be known as an expert on early modern literature, or somebody who worked on Irish, Scottish, post-colonial literary theory, whatever. I wasn't known for creative writing, so in that sense, and I'm saying this to get it out there as an honest truth, which is I didn't depend on that. And being self-effacing was very easy, because I was the big I am somewhere else. I was giving the plenary talks at Yale on Edmund Spenser, so I had my big I am moments in the sun all over the place. When it came to students, I very much, but generally speaking with students, I always put myself in a subordinate position and push them. And when I had my recent kind of collaborations celebration thing on my 30 years at Glasgow, I thought it's true to say that I was very supportive of students, that I put in the extra hours, that I went the extra mile, that I did extra support, additional support for them, that I helped them to get grants and jobs and all kinds of things to get published. A lot of them get published. I was a bit Jean Brodie about it, you know, all my students were to publish, my creative writing students, and even my PhD students had them published in reviews and stuff. So I was like a pushy parent without kids mowing. I was a pushy parent, and I did that, and I put in long hours, and I loved doing it, and I've got no regrets, because I was doing others. I had a prominent identity as a published non-fiction critical academic.
And there were such different worlds as well. It's not like you were a prominent academic looking at, you know, working class Scottish literature. I mean, I know that you did some of those things as well, but
it was tiny compared to what I did in terms of Shakespeare, Spenser, Milton. So I was doing prestige, you know, academically recognised stuff, and very many people who admired me or might have were interested in my work would not have thought of me as a creative writing tutor. Would have thought of me first and foremost as Professor of Renaissance Studies, which is the title I got in 1999, 25 years ago.
Your impact's profound, and then on not just writers, but then also on other excellent tutors who go on to kind of carry on that approach to noticing and
that's the model, what you just described.
My creative children and grandchildren.
You know? Which is the kind of thing that people were saying at collaborations. But I do think that there's something, I'd be interested to know whether there are other models of people from that period who had that sort of approach that then I think was unusual and now is much more widely accepted, even expected, for you to be, you know, like a pushy parent, but somebody who is, you know, who makes himself, to use your language, makes himself subordinate, but that sees that their role is to encourage and to support and to try and push people towards things that otherwise they might not know exist or know how to find. The very first Scottish Arts Council £2,000 I got after the MLit in order to be able to try and finish my first novel. I know that I found out about that because you told me about it. Right, so there are concrete ways that will have been unusual at the time. It could have easily just not happened, and then who knows, I wouldn't be doing this now. But now when I'm running my own course, what's my model for how you're supposed to do it and how you're supposed to treat people? Well, that's where it comes from. And there must be lots of other people that are doing similar things too, I think. And the culture has moved more towards us supporting others, rather than seeing art as a competition on the page, and that, you know, why are you not recognising what I've done?
Because it takes extra time, but it brings bigger rewards. Bigger rewards, even for the institution too, and I think institutions have woke up to that fact that having a prominent writer and producing writers is a fantastic thing. They're guaranteed to publish, and they'll be much better known than the person who wrote the book on Shakespeare, and so on. So I think that is an important.
But emotionally, socially, how we think about communities, all of those sorts of things, I think are integral. And although, to return to Alasdair, and I like to return to Alasdair and book references and some of your connections with him, because we're going fantastically and interestingly off topic, but which has never happened with us ever before. But I think to return to Alasdair, although he could never make that work within an institution like that, he was coming in much later, much older, from a very different world. Didn't have any of those.
He was older than I am now.
So there was very unlikely to work even before you factor in the particularities of his personality. But there was, and remains for me, an extremely common, extremely strong thread between what you're describing, what your approach is, what I think is at the absolute root of what I do and what I selfishly and emotionally get out of it, never mind financially. But there's a connection between all of that and the way that Alasdair had this moral view of the universe and chose to treat other people. But he would just show it in different ways, whether it was, what he insisted on paying us as assistants, how he talked to us. He never, ever, ever talked down to me, and I never saw him talk down to anybody else. So those sort of moral ways of sort of being an artist within a community and seeking to support others, although he couldn't make it work in an institution, he was making it work in the world. And that was that along with what you were doing within the institution of Glasgow and Strathclyde, that was my model for being able to see it. Like, okay, those are the two things that have to be put together in order to, sorry it sounds grand, but like live a moral life as an artist in this country at this time.
And Alasdair's little helpers were legion.
Yes.
As you know, he had many helpers, and he wrote me a letter about 1997 or thereabouts saying, this is a begging letter, that was the opening line, this is a begging letter, I am begging you to help me with this book of prefaces, would you write? And he gave me the list of writers that he needed to have prefaces written for. And I did that, and he said that the remuneration will be a portrait that I'll do. And I wrote back to Alasdair, I sent him the stuff which he completely rewrote and subverted.
So probably didn't save himself any time.
So it shouldn't even be on. It's still on my CV. I put it in my CV. It doesn't belong on my CV. I did William Wycherley and George Etheridge. Totally bogus credit for it. He completely rewrote it. He took much more of the kind of fun and wigs, David Biddell view of restoration comedy than I did. I saw it in the political note. Anyway, so he rewrote it. But he said to me, and the reward is that I'll do a portrait for you. And I wrote back and I said, Alasdair, if you were too busy to finish this book, I'm not going to take your time up with doing a portrait. I don't need a portrait, I don't want a portrait. Concentrate on finishing the book. He wouldn't take no for an answer. So he had me over to his house, 4th of December 1998, just after my 38th birthday. And he did this portrait of me. While he spoke constantly, spoke about asthma, which he had. I was much more cavalier with my Ventolin than he was. He really rationed the Ventolin. So we had a great chat, and it was lovely, and I'm glad that he did do that portrait. It was a historic thing, but and I vividly remember that day, and I've got the portrait on my wall and so on. But and Alasdair had that, so he was thoroughly networked, even though he was still, it's Alasdair's book. But that's really very much in the historical tradition of before the individual author, the big I am. There was this whole thing where you picked up a book, and in that book was a preface, a foreword, prefatory poet, dedicatory sonnets, and so on and so forth. So that the book actually 30 authors was credited maybe to one, but they were multi-authored, composite text, and Alasdair's texts have got that quality.
Yeah, they do. Even after all of these years, I must go to the toilet at some point. I must go for about an hour, but there's no opportunity.